Hello, everybody. We're just going to get started here in a minute on today's webisode of Embracing Rest Over the Holidays. Welcome. We're excited to have everybody here. And today, on today's webisode, we know that holidays are a time for joy and connection, but it definitely can throw off our sleep schedules. So my name is Katie Dumm. I'm a senior health services specialist here at Geisinger, and today I'm joined by Dr. Morse, who is our director of pediatric neurology here at Geisinger. And we are excited to dive into, why does rest get sidelined during the holidays, and how can we have some quick practical tips to help us protect our sleep so we can recharge and enjoy the most of the season brings. So just a quick disclaimer, this information is being provided, just to increase our awareness. It's not intended to be medical advice. If you have any specific medical conditions or specific questions to your own health, we do recommend that you talk to your physician. So thank you, Dr. Morse, welcome. And we're excited to have you join us today.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I know just a few weeks ago, we had the time change, and that definitely makes a difference. I know I've noticed the difference. I see the sunrise every morning now, all of a sudden, before I start work. So that's definitely different. It's also getting dark earlier. I feel like my kids are practically, barely home from school, and all of a sudden it's already getting dark out. So it's definitely thrown our routine off a little bit. And so I thought maybe we would start just by talking about sleep and these seasonal shifts and how it can impact our overall well-being. So how does this time of year affect our sleep patterns? Are there any positives or negatives to the time change?
Sure. So I think that this is a very important concept and one that many times people are feeling the effects on their daytime. And so they may not necessarily be thinking about it as a sleep related problem. And so one of the things I always like to reassure everyone is that the day and night are actually very much connected. And so all 24 hours matter. And so what you do during the day impacts your night, and what you do during the night impacts your day. And so what you're experiencing when you talk about daylight saving time, and even though it feels like it's just an hour, why should I be impacted at all? Like I've stayed up late an hour before, or I woke up an hour earlier. I didn't feel this way. Well, the reason is that when you're staying up late an hour or waking up earlier an hour, that's a singular time point, and it isn't necessarily disrupting something called your circadian rhythm, your day night 24-hour rhythm. And when you're talking about how bodies are designed, they're very intricately designed to function at an expected way across 24 hours. And so when you take a person who their body is expecting to be doing certain things at certain times of the day, and all of a sudden arbitrarily change it by 1 hour and change the expectations of what your body's supposed to do, it really goes into shock. And so some people more extreme than others, but really what you're going to see as a temporary adjustment is you're going to feel grogginess. Some people describe it as that brain fog, that cloudiness. I just don't feel as sharp. They may be waking earlier than desired because we fell back, and although we got that extra hour of sleep, and because the average American is sleep deprived, are like, this is amazing. They then are going, why do I feel so cruddy with that extra hour of sleep? And this unfortunately begins to reinforce that concept that many of us have of, I can get away with less sleep. I do better on less sleep because when I get that extra sleep, I feel terrible. And so this really is, you also have created a description with your children of some other true concerns that we don't necessarily think about. And so we do see at this time of year, there is a safety hazard that also occurs because we have our kiddos who are, especially if they're doing extracurriculars, getting off of the school bus when it's very dark, and therefore putting them at risk of getting hit in traffic. And then also our newer drivers potentially driving at times of day where their body is not used to it and can also make it a compromised state. So it is something that from the capacity of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, we strongly advocate for standard time, a permanent standard time. However, our bodies really are designed to really have that predictability. And so that's where we can definitely see some of that dysfunction that can be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see that, in my own life as well as others around me. So in addition to adjusting for the time change, with heading into this busy season filled with the holidays, shopping, cooking,
Sure.
parties, all kinds of traditions. We're doing a lot this time of year.
Yes.
All these activities can also disrupt our sleep schedules. So it makes it even more important for us to prioritize our sleep habits during this time. How does increased stress and irregular sleep that we see during the holiday season affect our immune function and our overall health?
Yeah, so when we're looking at the relationship here, it is one that, especially at this time of year where everyone is sick. I have two little kids myself, a 5 and 8-year-old, and yes, they're walking around as little petri dishes that constantly are like boogered and coughing, etc. And so when we are becoming more sleep compromised, and whether that means we're having insufficient sleep, either by accident or intention. I'm stressed, and therefore my body is at high alert. And when I try to put my head down and hit the pillow, it's going. I'm just having nonstop thoughts and it's disrupting my ability to sleep versus I need to stay up late and wrap some presents so that no one is seeing it. Both of those are suffering the consequence of actually putting your body into a pro-inflammatory state. Now, what's interesting is although we are creating more signals for our body to be like, you should be stressed and you should be fighting something, it also at the same time, while producing those signals, actually suppresses our immune system from reacting appropriately to the things that it should be fighting. And so what this results in is the periods that we've all experienced is we are on driving on full adrenaline with caffeine and very little sleep. And then what do we ultimately experience? That crash. And we become sick. And we're sicker than what that usual sickness is. It's not by accident, it's by design. It's the design that your body's not responding the way it should because of the fact that it wasn't prepared for the illness that you're experiencing. And it does result in an increased likelihood for you to be sick, but also a slower recovery from that illness. Now, the good part is that our bodies are very intelligently designed. And so those same things that are now increasing because it's trying to battle that illness actually are telling your body to sleep more. And so when when you were little and your mom was saying you need to rest to recover, she actually did get a PhD in sleep. And she's telling you true scientific information of that it is enhancing something called your homeostatic drive so that you sleep more, so that you recover more quickly. I wish I could say that that was the only consequences related. However, it also does you no favors in regards to metabolic health. You're going to be more likely to have lower glucose or blood sugar management. You're going to be more likely to have higher blood sugars, regardless of whether you take that one cookie or three cookies, as well as making you more likely to crave those extra cookies and not feel as full. So it really does do a number on us. And so it is important to be mindful of thinking about your full day and how you can utilize it to maximize the experience you have during this holiday season.
Excellent. Wow. A lot to think about, a lot goes into our immune function for sure. And with the stress and irregular sleep, we know it takes that toll on our health. And we also need to talk about more strategies. So I know you were talking a little bit about that. I want to talk more about, how can we help manage these disruptions? We also have travel thrown in a little bit with the holiday season. And sometimes that involves by car or by plane to visit family or other, maybe if we're lucky and take a vacation during the holiday season or something like that. So
Yeah.
what are some techniques or even if there's any medications that can help restore sleep after some of those disruptions? Some are good disruptions that we can't avoid. But like, how can we recover and what are some good techniques?
Yeah, so I think that it's really important to be mindful of planning for what it is that you are trying to encounter. And then also, if it is coming with time changes because you're either going to California or you're heading to Europe, to be mindful of the direction that you're going. And then also, what is the time that you're arriving there and what is going to be expected of you? And so, the same as just that 1 hour time frame that we see with daylight saving time can really wreak havoc for about 3 to 7 days. The same thing can be true when you're talking about traveling. And so it is important to be mindful that what you want to really think about is the location that I'm going to. What is right now the time of day there? When are they eating? When are they doing different activities? And the reason I bring that up is because there's evidence that gives great suggestion that adopting the eating patterns of the location that you're going to while you're still in your time zone make it easier for your body to transition to that new time zone. So there's things like intermittent restrictive eating. So doing that time restricted eating, and that essentially is a similar concept to being able to say, if right now is 6 p.m. dinner time for the location I'm going, I should try to adopt that behavior now, because that is a very strong cue that our body utilizes to be able to adjust. With every other type of day of the year, things that you also want to make sure that you're thinking about is, am I giving myself the right opportunity to actually sleep? You can't sleep 8 hours if you're only giving yourself 6 hours in bed. And so you then are going to experience those consequences. If you are finding that you're having a big time travel and there is a challenge with being awake and feeling very sleepy when you get there, taking a power nap, that 20-minute nap, can potentially be helpful while you're making those adjustments, so that you're not just trying to grunt through the day and feel miserable and not really experience the joyous, relaxing experience that you should be having, and instead being able to utilize some of those strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know in this past question, you just, kind of talked a little bit about food, and we know the holidays are filled with a ton of amazing food. A lot of times there's special dishes we're only getting once or twice a year, so we look forward to that. But it got me thinking, could what we eat actually influence our sleep and how we sleep? So, how do those holiday indulgences like the rich foods, some adult beverages, things like that affect our sleep? And are there any foods that can actually help us sleep better?
Sure. So, in regards to the holidays, yes, there's definitely, we see this both with Thanksgiving and then all the holidays we see after that. With what we find is that outside of holidays, we also are seeing that the quantity of food, the quality of food, and the timing of food has significant implications on your sleep. And it can be for a variety of different reasons. There's some evidence that gives suggestion that if you're taking in like those very spicy type of foods, that it actually, in addition to increasing reflux, may be more likely to cause you to have more nightmare disorder. And so producing some of this more intense type of dreaming. With the regards of having things like reflux or heartburn, one of the things to be mindful of is if you're a person who's living with obstructive sleep apnea, having reflux actually worsens the severity of your sleep apnea, and your sleep apnea worsens the severity of your reflux. And so that then can be a very vicious cycle. We generally are telling people to be mindful of how close to bed that they are eating, because having a bunch of food sitting in your stomach is going to make it more likely for it to be coming up and refluxing for you. And that also can make it difficult for you to fall asleep, just because you're feeling very uncomfortable and distended. So the food amount is definitely something that you do want to think about. Now, the other component in regards to thinking about your desserts, and maybe you're having with some caffeine, or maybe it's a little bit of Bailey's. Both of those can have some negative impact on your ability to sleep. Now, what's interesting, if you look at the United States, it is very common for people to be experiencing a sleep problem. In fact, the most recent Gallup polls show almost 2/3 of US adults having insufficient sleep. Now, with that stated, it doesn't mean that we see 2/3 of the United States coming to our sleep clinics, because everyone thinks it's normal, and common and normal aren't the same thing. However, when it's becoming problematic, we tend to self-medicate, and alcohol is one of the most commonly utilized self-medications, one that we do not recommend. So although it's going to make you fall asleep if you take in enough, it generally is going to wreak havoc on the quality of your sleep and make you more likely for you to have the development of other sleep disorders, as well as obviously the consequence of having alcohol. If you're going to have caffeine, trying to limit it before 2 o'clock becomes also a really important thing.
Oh, 2 o'clock. I'm off on that one a little bit. I think I go a little too late sometimes, but that's great advice. Thank you. And you touched on this also because I know you're talking about sleep apnea, and during the holidays, it's obviously one of the most common periods of time for weight gain. And a lot of times the weight we gain during the holiday season, unfortunately, sticks with us through the rest of the year.
Sure.
So we know being mindful of those choices can help us, with our health goals. But can you talk a little bit more about that relationship between weight management and sleep?
Sure. So when we're talking about sleep, I think one of the things that is important for people to realize is that there tends to be this hyperfixation on the number of hours of sleep. And the average adult, we generally are saying you should get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. However, we know that it's not just the duration, it's the quality of sleep, it's the timing of sleep, it is the regularity of sleep. And so when we are having dysfunction in any of those areas, insufficient amount, poor quality, irregular sleep, it again is putting our body in this position where our hormonal system is actually creating a milieu of very poor signaling that's telling us, you're hungry, you're hungry, you're hungry. Nope, you're not full yet. Yeah, you should definitely eat those potato chips. And that cupcake looks great as well. And what you end up then experiencing is, I feel horrible after I do that. I then become more sedentary, less active, and then also can result in things like increased likelihood for developing diabetes or poor control of our diabetes, worse control of our blood pressure, our heart failure, you name it, it's not a good recipe. And so no one wants to be on a diet during the holidays or say, I'm watching my weight, we're going to skip the cookies. It's a matter of saying, how can I pace myself? I'm a big fan of telling people there is no bad food, there's bad amounts of food to be taken. And so making sure you're just balancing it and then being mindful that as we age, our metabolisms change. And so does our ability to fall and stay asleep in the same capacity, which is going to create really just a complexity of things that can be really challenging for us. So being mindful and purposeful of, yes, I'm going to have that dessert because I do only get it twice a year. However, I also am going to make sure that I go and walk an extra 20 minutes this week and try to make that a regular habit.
Absolutely. All about balance, finding that right balance for sure. We're going to shift gears a little bit, talk some about the kiddos. So we know that's your area of expertise there. And
Sure.
we know that the holidays bring all this excitement. And as a mom myself, I know sometimes that like night before Christmas,
Sure.
it's often very hard to get them to settle down with so much going on. And then you have shifts in schedules, they're suddenly out of school, they're home, and all the other things going on. So what strategies would you suggest or routines that, parents could use to help those excited kids wind down and really get settled into bed?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is don't wait until Christmas Eve or the night before a big day to start implementing a strategy. It's never going to work. What you really want to do is the same conditioning that they've had since day one of school, of really understanding that there has to be the habits of, I need to fall asleep, I need to have a schedule, I need to have those circadian cues. Try to maintain them to as close as what you normally are doing. So if your child normally is going to bed at 9 o'clock at night and waking up at 6 a.m., then really allowing for the latest for them to fall asleep being 10 o'clock and the latest that they're waking up being 7. When we start letting them have very erratic sleep wake schedules, the brain doesn't know what to expect. And then you add in something that's going to excite them, and they're not going to be able to wind down. And it's going to result in someone who's up all night, too excited, and crashing on Christmas Day or the day of celebration that you're having, and really not being enjoyable for anyone because you have an irritable child who is very cranky. And so one of the things I would say is definitely maintaining some degree of control over what their patterns are, but then also helping them to be able to burn off a lot of energy during the day, especially if you know it's going to be a very excitable, so that it's enhancing, again, that natural drive to wanting to fall asleep, no matter how much they want to battle it.
Excellent advice. Absolutely. And speaking of crashing, we often find that, with this busy time, sometimes we overdo it and we find that either ourselves or our kids are wanting to take a nap and maybe they're beyond that kind of napping age. And sometimes we'll set that timer for a quick, I'm going to take a quick power nap. And then it ends up being, a much longer nap than we intend. You kind of wake up and you're like, whoa, what happened? Where did all that time go? So are power naps actually effective? Is there such a thing as an effective napping? And how does that compare to longer naps?
Sure. So I think that one of the things I always like to make the distinction of is, as a sleep doctor, it's not that we're opposed to napping, but we're opposed to ignoring the fact that if you're requiring napping on a regular basis, that's a call to action that there's something wrong. So just as you said, things get busy, and I find that in a week I need to take a 20, and even if it's a longer nap, if it's the one off, it's not as much of a concern. However, if it's something I'm consistently doing, it is a call to action that you're having either insufficient sleep, poor quality sleep, or even potentially something like a hypersomnolence disorder. With a 20-minute power nap or a 30-minute power nap, the reason why we generally are making the guidance of trying to reduce it to that period of time is because the longer duration my nap is during the day, the more that it's going to eat into my desire to want to sleep at night. So if you think about our cell phones and how it used to be like strongly advised, don't be charging it partially all the time, you're going to zap that battery. The same thing happens to our homeostatic drive, the thing that wants to put us to sleep, is that if I'm partially recharging it and then I think I'm going to fall asleep at 9, 10 o'clock like I normally do, I'm not, because I don't have that drive to fall asleep. And many times we fool ourselves into thinking, well, I'm so exhausted, I know I'm going to fall asleep at night. No, 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 no. Your body's physiology is smarter than what we think we are.
Absolutely. I love that analogy. That's such a great analogy with the cell phone. I think those of us that were around when cell phones first started coming out, that charging, that was like ingrained in us, I think. So I do want to hit a little bit back to traveling. We do find ourselves traveling and sometimes, like we said, in those off hours. And, a lot of times we're exhausted after having a great day, doing something. But we do hear those cases of people getting drowsy behind the wheel and sometimes even dozing off, and how dangerous that can be, not only for ourselves but everybody else on the road. So do you mind just talking a little bit about how common is drowsy driving and just how dangerous is it?
Yeah, so this is an area of very big importance to me, because my area of expertise is within hypersomnolence disorder, so conditions like narcolepsy and idiopathic hypersomnia. So I speak all over the world on these types of conditions and the significance of excessive sleepiness. And so one of the things that I always make sure that my patients understand is that driving while sleepy actually confers the reaction time and risk as driving while drunk. And if knowingly driving while sleepy, it actually confers the same legal risk as driving while drunk. And so, with that stated, it is something that we can't miss. And many times we think, if I turn up the radio, I roll down the window, I put the air condition up higher, I'm more awake, I'm more alert. And what research has demonstrated is that subjectively, I fool myself. I feel like I'm more alert. However, it doesn't change our reaction time or our judgment. So we're more inclined to make the wrong choice and have the wrong moves, which then can lead to a fatal car accident. And in fact, when you look statistically, 1 in 25 adults will describe that they fell asleep at the wheel in the past month. 40% will say that they drove while drowsy in the last month. And when you're looking at the fatal car crashes involved with drowsiness, more than 6,000 a year. So it's not an uncommon pathology, and it's not something that people are leaving unscathed. And even if you say, well, it wasn't fatal, but it was severe, almost 15% of car crashes are related to driving while drowsy. So it's not something that you want to do. If you have to drive and you're feeling drowsy, two things that can potentially be beneficial is, one, that strategic nap. That strategic nap will temporarily reduce that drive to wanting to fall asleep and temporarily improve your performance. Alternatively, strategic caffeine. For some of my patients, we're using strategic stimulants or wake promoting agents in order to be able to help them to be able to do that travel more safely.
Really great advice. That's one of the things that scares me most, I think, is the drowsy driving. And
Yeah.
my husband and I have our own methods to make sure that the right person's driving when we're driving home, especially from, the holidays. So
Yeah.
great advice. We did actually receive a question ahead of time that was asking about, the environment we sleep in and how important that is. Factors like the quality of our pillows or mattresses, room temperature, and overall, how do those settings play a role in our sleep quality? So would you mind just discussing a little bit about what makes that ideal sleep environment? Obviously, it's not the car. So we want to know, what is the right sleep environment?
Sure.
What goes into that?
Sure, unless you're a neonate, and so sometimes our babies, they love to fall asleep in the car.
True.
And so when looking at these things, these are actually some of the factors that we will discuss with people in regards to what we call sleep hygiene, making sure that you're sleeping in an environment that is conducive to sleep. So you want to be mindful of what is the temperature, what is the noise level, what is the comfort that you are in. And so mainly you want to be in a bed that, depending on whether or not you have any other medical issues or otherwise, what actually has been studied there, I was impressed to see that there's been such tremendous study in mattresses. And overall, it pretty consistently recently has demonstrated a medium to firm mattress tends to be preferred irrespective of your body position of sleeping. When you're looking at your pillows, that does actually then become relevant to what kind of sleeper you are. And there are some pillows that are better for a side sleeper versus someone who's laying on their back versus someone who's laying on their stomach. Now, with that stated, we typically are saying that laying on your side may be more beneficial than laying on your back, especially if you're prone to things like sleep apnea. The appropriate temperature in the room should be actually pretty cold. We generally are saying around 60 degrees. And that, again, is going to help for you to not only be able to fall asleep, but stay asleep throughout the night. And then when talking about lighting, it is most beneficial for it to be dark as well as for it to be quiet. If you struggle with maybe there's a little bit of light coming in, the most easiest fix is if you can sleep with a sleep mask. That may be something that can help you in falling and staying asleep. If you're someone who's like, the quietness drives me insane and my mind just starts going, using things like white noise. I personally, if I'm traveling or I'm having one of those nights where my brain doesn't stop, I use the lullabies that I actually put my kids to sleep with, because it gives me both the kind of feeling of being with my children as well as something that is distracting from what my thoughts might be.
Awesome. I love to hear. I feel like I just recently moved out to a more rural setting, and I've definitely been sleeping better. And it's a lot quieter and a lot darker out here. So that might be the reason. And lastly, as the holidays approach, we're thinking about what to put on our wish list. So do you have any suggestions for any gadgets, cozy items, things that you suggest that maybe are sleep related items we should be considering putting on that wish list for the holidays?
Sure. One of the things I always like to start with is, if you're struggling with sleep, before investing a lot of money into gadgets and mattresses and everything else, because we see that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, please partner with a healthcare professional to see whether or not you have a medical or sleep disorder that may be explaining it. Now, with that stated, if you've already done that and you either are diagnosed or working up a diagnosis or it's been excluded, some of the things that you may want to think about are going to be, what is preventing you from getting your best night's sleep or your best day's performance? And so things like wearable devices can be something that can inform for you what your patterns of behavior are that are being passively collected. So you don't have to do all of the mindset of, I have to remember to record these things. It's giving you some data insights to understand, improve your self-awareness of what actually may be getting in the way of your best night's sleep. Other things that you may want to think about are nice breathable pajamas, things that are going to be allowing you not to get the night sweats. This also becomes relevant if you're a woman who's going through menopause and you're experiencing those night sweats. Please know there are medications now available to treat those things and may actually benefit your sleep as well. However, we sometimes become prey to, I want to get the most flannel and cozy and bundled up, and that's going to wake us up in the middle of the night because we're going to overheat and become too sweaty. So making sure you have something that's breathable. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, if you're a person who it's light or it's sound, thinking about what you may be able to accommodate in your room, whether it's going to be using a sleep mask or using some music or otherwise. One other piece is, if you have kiddos who maybe are challenged with, I'm scared of the dark and I have night lights, but then they're still waking up. Data has also demonstrated that replacing your white light nightlight with a red light nightlight may actually help with perpetuating the sleep, because red light is more aligned with our sleep time behaviors.
Oh, very interesting. Now I know to turn on my kids' light to the red setting. They have like a galaxy light they like on. So
Yeah.
I think it's time to start turning that to the red light. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Morse. Your insights and tips have been wonderful. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to send them to wellness@geisinger.edu. And we're happy to, try to get those answered for you after the fact if you think of something. And we wish everybody the best over the holiday season, and prioritize your sleep. If you've listened in today, we really hope that everybody takes that seriously and see how essential that is. So don't forget to join us next month. We'll be talking about staying fit in the frost, and we look forward to seeing everybody then. Thanks again, everyone.